everyone, my name is Dallas and you are watching the Fantasy Football Outpost. Welcome. This is our podcast format type videos that we will be making every single week. This is episode 1. Short breakdown of what you can expect from these is we're going to start off with news, and then we're going to have our topic, then we're going to have our Q&A, and I'll get into that a little bit. And then our special segment that I don't believe anybody else is doing. I believe it's original. I came up with it myself, so if someone else is doing it, then sorry. I've not seen it anywhere else. I definitely try to look out for these things as I try to stay original. So stick around to the very end of this, and you'll be able to see what that new segment is exactly that I'm talking about. So right off the bat, let's go ahead and get into some news that has happened over the last week. Basically, some of this is going to be old news to you for this coming out on a Wednesday. These are all recorded on Tuesdays. Some of this may be brand new to you. I always try to do it for everybody because you have to assume not everyone has seen everything. So right off the bat, the number one news that we had this past week, everyone has heard about it unless you're living under a rock, is Tyreek Hill is not going to be suspended. Now this is huge. He finished last year the number one wide receiver in multiple formats. I think he was number 3 in full PPR. Nonetheless, the guy absolutely slays in fantasy. So this is pretty huge. A lot of people, he just moved up on their boards. Me personally, he moved up to the 3rd spot. I would still take DeAndre Hopkins, then I'd take Devontae Adams, and then I'd take Tyreek Hill. But we'll get more into that when we get to our wide receivers episode. Not only is this great news for Tyreek Hill fantasy football owners and his outlook that he's going to have over the season, but this is also huge for Patrick Mahomes. The people that take a hit from this is Sammy Watkins right off the bat, obviously, and Mecole Hardman. That's one a lot of people were really excited about, thinking he was going to come in and kind of fill that Tyreek Hill role. Obviously, you can expect what Tyreek Hill done last year from the rookie, but he had a pretty great opportunity in front of him, and be curious to see how that works out now. So the second thing on our list is Melvin Gordon is holding out, and he's still holding out. And the other big side of this is the Chargers are prepared to wait. Now, from a comment that I read, Melvin Gordon state that he expects the Chargers to either cave further into the season or trade him. To me, that comes off as I'm prepared to wait as long as I need to get this to happen. And that right there is a scary sign for anybody that's trying to just hope that he ends up just saying, it's okay, guys. We'll figure this out after the season. You guys can franchise tag me, run me into the ground, and leave me for nothing. And I don't really think that's a possibility here, especially with those comments. I have a feeling we are in for another Le'Veon Bell situation that I hope doesn't drag out as long as Le'Veon Bell's did, but ultimately, only time will tell. The third one, this is pretty huge, but small at the same time. DeAndre Hopkins is on the active, physically unable to perform list. Now, for those of you that don't know the difference between the active PUP and the reserve PUP, active can be activated at any time, so those are a lot less serious. So it's something you probably can tread lightly about. Apparently it has something to do with a shoulder injury that he suffered against the Colts in their playoff last year. But from what I'm seeing and reading, it's not that big of a deal. Just something we want to keep our eyes on, especially for somebody who I personally think is the number one wide receiver this year. Next on the list is Julian Edelman was spotted with a brace on his thumb and is expected to miss 3 weeks. This is one of those you have to play by ear. If come preseason week 3, he's out there running reps perfectly fine, practice he's good, completely off any of the list, and is playing just fine, I say ignore this completely. But if this is still causing him some issues, a little bit of soreness in practice and stuff leading right up to week 1, I think he's got to fall back a little bit, because right now he's projected pretty high on most ADPs. So you got to kind of tread lightly with this. But if everything's fine come week 1, I don't think this is anything to be concerned about at all. Sonny Michel entered training camp on the active, physically unable to perform list. This is a little concerning, especially with what he deals with his injury history with his knees. I personally think this is the same situation as Julian Edelman. If he ends up okay, fully ready to go, then you should be fine. But this only adds to what I've been telling people with Sonny Michel, is I feel like he's one of the only players in the league I think you absolutely have to draft their backup with. And so to all those out there that draft Sonny Michel, I highly recommend you make sure you lock down Damian Harris. For one, if he gets hurt, you have Damian Harris. And for two, if Damian Harris ends up sneaking up and taking his job, because that's what a lot of people are thinking might happen as well. I personally think fully healthy Sonny Michel is too talented for that. They may end up splitting if Damien Harris is that talented, but ultimately I don't feel that's the case. I feel like as long as everything's fine, you're going to see what you did last year. I think James White may be the biggest beneficiary from this news, just because that also tells you he's going to be out there a little bit more. But at the same time, his role doesn't really rely on the carry-heavy back. He's kind of there. He's going to get his job done. It's just a lot of people are thinking he's going to fall back some because of the astronomical numbers he put up last year. So this is another one to keep your eye on. Ultimately, I don't think it's going to be anything if the soreness is gone and he's perfectly fine come week 1. But if he's even remotely sore after practices, enough to the point where they mention it, definitely be concerned about Sonny Michel. The next is 2 Travises being ready for training camp. One of them you guys absolutely know about, and he's a big deal to all of you. The other one, a lot of you don't realize this is actually a bigger deal than you might think. The first one is obviously Travis Kelce. He's having some ankle issues. We were a little concerned about that. Not too much. I don't think anybody really took it too seriously, but he's perfectly fine. He's ready to go for training camp. The other Travis that's ready to go for training camp, this one, in my opinion, is a little bit bigger deal because Travis Kelce, we assumed, was fine, is Travis Frederick, the starting center for the Dallas Cowboys, perennial Pro Bowler every single year, missed all of last year due to a syndrome I am not going to try to embarrass myself trying to pronounce, but it was very, very devastating blow because when you have a center that good on the offensive line, he is the commander for everything, pointing out on the defense who's coming up, who's going out, and is very, very, very valuable to benefit the rest of the offensive line. The fact that he's back, that O-line general that they need, that is actually huge news for both Dak Prescott and Ezekiel Elliott. Ezekiel Elliott did great last year, through the roof numbers rushing as always, and he got incorporated into the passing game, and that was with a beaten up offensive line, not quite as bad as we've seen the year before, but you lost the most important piece in my opinion with Travis Frederick. You could argue Zach Martin, Tyron Smith's right there. Obviously their whole offensive line is great when they're healthy, and it looks like that's going to be the case this year. So don't just sleep on the Travis Frederick being healthy news. That's actually a pretty big deal. The next in line was Tyler Boyd signed a 4-year, $43 million contract, which doesn't really change much in our eyes as fantasy owners, other than the fact that they're confident in him and they're going to keep him around, and I don't see his role slowing down at all. So Tyler Boyd is still going to be a definite great watch to look to try and snag in that 5th, 6th, 7th round, wherever he ends up falling for you in your league. And I definitely think he's going to be a really good possible flex, maybe even just a bench guy that can come in and kill it. We've all seen his ceiling. He can be a wide receiver too at some weeks. So I definitely think this is good news that he got signed. You not have to deal with anything other than focusing on football and ready to go. So I think Tyler Boyd doesn't really change a lot in most of our eyes, but it does make you feel a little bit more confident that his role is not going to regress at all. Another one is kind of a low-key big deal. I won't say big deal. I don't think I can put him and big deal in the same conversation anymore, although I used to be able to easily. But Delanie Walker managed to avoid the physically unable to perform list and is fully active, ready to go for training camp, which is, in my opinion, a pretty, like I said, I don't want to say big deal, but it's really good news because a lot of us expected him to start this period of the year at least a little banged up, hurt to where wouldn't even have him ready to go yet. But he is, so it's a good sign for those of you trying to wait and take a tight end last pick. Or for those of you that take a tight end pretty early and looking for that maybe, that one that just hits that you take super late, Delanie Walker may be your guy, and that takes a little bit of that stress off, wondering if he's going to be okay or not. This is good news in that direction. The last one, the one that I think frustrates me more than anything, is the Eagles signed Darren Sproles to a 1-year contract. Great for him. That's awesome for him as a player. Horrible for all of us fantasy owners that want to try and just get a little bit of a taste in the Eagles running back backfield that I personally think, with the signing of Darren Sproles, has made this a backfield that I am completely ruling out of any of my drafts. Mainly because of the price that you have to pay for the players. Miles Sanders is an exciting pick, probably the only one on the team that I could get a little bit excited for. But the problem is this signing, and all the 19 other running backs that this team has, everybody makes jokes about the 49ers, but I think this team's in probably a worse situation than the 49ers are in when it comes to fantasy running back. Miles Sanders is probably the only one that I'm even a little bit excited about. Primarily, though, with that injury going on, both him and Jordan Howard, ADPs or 8th round picks, and it's just not worth it for me at that price. Now, if they start slipping because of this, I could see myself maybe snagging a Miles Sanders late, maybe 10th, 11th round if he somehow slips that far, just for the shot in the dark that hopefully sometime during the season he takes over the role. But quite honestly, I think this is just going to be a continuing, everybody splitting everything, committee to a T, running back core. One guy's going to be good at one thing, the other guy's going to come in and steal the third downs and the end zone reps. Another guy's going to be taking all the PPR action, and quite honestly, I don't think there's a good pick in this backfield. So them signing him to one more year, I think ultimately is bad news, but it is news nonetheless. And I guess we're just gonna have to see how this team plays out over the year. That does it for the news today. Now we got all of these stories from the Sleeper app and Bleacher Report are the two main ones that I like to use. Obviously, I use any and all sources I can use, but those are the best. I'm not sponsored or anything by either of those. They're just genuinely good sources to use, and I highly recommend both of them. That's Sleeper app and Bleacher Report. Bleacher Report, you can go in and pick. It does more than just football, but you can go in and pick your favorite teams. Also select a category called fantasy football, so you get notified on that stuff too. Bleacher Report and Sleeper app, I highly recommend for most of this information. But this is an easier way to look at it, is just come watch my episodes, and I'll give you the important ones. There's a few here and there that I may skip. That's primarily because they're really not that relevant, or they're not relevant yet. But that's going to be it for our news segment. Let's go ahead and move on to our main topic. Okay, so the topic this week is obviously by far the most popular thing in fantasy football. It is the running back position. Everyone wants to know what running backs to take, which ones are the best. And this year, it's pretty unanimous at the start, but once we get a little bit into it, that's when things get a little bit tricky on the tail end of the top 10, especially past that point. But we're covering the top 10 running backs today. So according to the Sleeper app's ADPs, your top 10 running backs as it stands right now are Saquon Barkley at 1.9, Christian McCaffrey at 2.6, Ezekiel Elliott at 3.2, Alvin Kamara at 3.4, David Johnson at 6, Melvin Gordon at 9.9, Le'Veon Bell at 10.1, James Conner at 13.1, Joe Mixon at 15.4, Todd Gurley at 16.8. That's your top 10. There's a few more honorable mentions I'm going to throw in here up to 15. You have Dalvin Cook at 17.8, Damian Williams at 19.6, Nick Chubb at 22.1, Aaron Jones at 26.4, and topping it off at the top 15, 15th is Leonard Fournette at 28.6. Now this is based off ADPs in the Sleeper app's mock drafts, which I personally think are the most accurate that you can get. Fantasy Football Calculator is also a really good one. The one I highly recommend staying away from, which is ironically the platform that I use at my home league. I use the NFL Fantasy app. They finally upgraded it and it's starting to look really good. That being said, we're open to possibly changing in the coming years. We're not sure. I play on that one. I also have a work one that I participate on Yahoo. But the ADPs and the mock drafts are by far the most accurate on the Sleeper app. And one highly recommendation I have is if you're over there on the Yahoo or the ESPN or the NFL app, do some Sleeper mock drafts to see how these players are really ranked. And then you'll know the kind of steals that you can snag in the NFL draft. Whereas like you have a player that may be 4th round on the NFL's mock drafts, and he's actually like a 2nd rounder in any other draft that you're in. So if you can wait and take him in a 3rd, to everyone else it looks like you reached, but you know that was actually a steal. That's one way you can kind of benefit that. Nonetheless, that is Sleeper's top 15 running backs. So now I'm going to give you guys my top 10 running backs in PPR format. That's full PPR. Now these will vary based on what type of league you're playing. I like to base all my ratings on full PPR. It's the only way I play. I may be open to half point in the future. I definitely do not like standard anymore. I think it's outdated. I personally prefer full PPR, and that's the way a lot of people have gone. Even NFL's fantasy app, the standard is now PPR. So my top 10 PPR running backs go as follows. Number 1 is pretty obvious. It's Saquon Barkley. And the positives that I have for him is his astronomical ability to put up numbers. I mean, simply put, he absolutely balled out all year last year. Some people saw it coming. Most people were hyped about him. I don't think anybody expected him to go over the top like this. And as you can see, everyone's on that same boat because he is unanimously the number 1 running back across the board. He has almost no risk in a PPR except one. And this is the negative that I have for him. The Giants lost Odell Beckham Jr., and Eli Manning is their quarterback. Their number one receiver is up in the air between Sterling Shepard and Golden Tate. The second best player on this offense after Saquon Barkley is Evan Ingram at the tight end position, if we're not getting into linemen and stuff like that. And so the problem that I see with Saquon Barkley is you're going to have a lot of defenses do what happened to Ezekiel Elliott at the beginning of last year, is they're going to stack the boxes on him and not allow him to go anywhere. Now, Saquon's super talented, so if you have everybody loading the box against you, if he breaks through that, there's no one behind that, and he's going to have a high chance at these explosive runaway plays where he gets 70 yards and a touchdown. And then also you have the PPR factor into it, where these people are going to be so committed to the run that you have a fake. They play off of him once they realize you don't have the ball. This is where the complicated part comes in, because this is where Eli Manning is going to have to be good at selling down the field, because then he can dump it off to Saquon right to the side, and there you go. You already got 1 point off of that, and with his open field ability, he's going to be able to create some yardage after the catch for sure. He showed us that last year. So all in all, the risk you run into is them not having enough talent to go around to make the defenses respect anything other than Saquon Barkley. But I think he's so talented enough to where I don't see how you could pass him up on the first pick. He may not finish number 1 overall, and I think if he doesn't, it's going to be because of defenses loading the box. But do you want to be that guy that passed up on Saquon Barkley number 1 overall in a PPR league? That being said, number 2 is where the debate starts kicking in. Almost nobody debates number 1 with Saquon. Number 2 through 4 are all interchangeable depending on your opinions. This is mine. Number 2 for me is Ezekiel Elliott. And the reason for that is I still don't think people give Ezekiel Elliott the PPR respect that he deserves when it comes to his catching ability. Last year, he finally showed us that, and he had over 500 receiving yards with 77 catches. So he showed us there he is absolutely a force to be reckoned with in the passing game, and Dak Prescott showed us he likes dumping it off to him when he doesn't have any other options. So Ezekiel Elliott is going to start demanding the respect in PPR formats. On top of that, in anything non-PPR, Ezekiel Elliott, he is your clear-cut number 1. In my personal opinion, at solely running the ball, taking catching completely out of it, Ezekiel Elliott is the best running back in the NFL. Now, that's debatable, obviously, but this is my opinion. And so you take the best sole running back in the NFL and factor in the fact that he is now getting in the passing game as well. For me personally, I think it's a no-brainer. Ezekiel Elliott, number 2. Just to add to the end of this, the negative that I have for Ezekiel Elliott is you want to keep an eye on his contract situation. We're hearing a lot of rumors and stuff talking about him possibly sitting out. If he gets paid or he shows up for camp, completely disregard this and you should be good to go. If he starts sitting out, you may want to tread lightly on taking him that early. He may slip a little bit if that's the case, but as long as he's there reporting and ready to go, he's absolutely your number 2. Now, I don't have a clear-cut number 3 or 4. That's why for number 3, I have a 1A, 1B. Yes, I'm talking about Christian McCaffrey and Alvin Kamara. Big surprise. Everybody knew who was coming here. The biggest question is who is before the other. Most people lean Christian McCaffrey above Kamara. They also lean him above Elliott in a lot of different drafts. But me personally, I actually lean Kamara slightly above McCaffrey, but we're also splitting hairs at this point. So to try and say that I would absolutely take Kamara over McCaffrey, that could change based on the weather. Because if I hear one thing at all in the negative or positive going either direction, it's going to constantly go back and forth. McCaffrey's killing it in his workouts. They love the way he looks. He looks like he's going to be even better than last year. Oh, now I think I kind of like McCaffrey. Kamara, I seen a workout video on Good Morning Football where he was standing on an exercise ball while a guy was throwing him these 3-pronged pieces of plastic. I don't really know what you would call them. That had 3 different colors on them, and while standing on the exercise ball, they would throw him one at a time and call out the color as they let go, and he'd have to catch it by that color while bouncing on this ball. And right there, I was like, God, man, he's killing it. He's ready to go. So let's go ahead and get into our positive and negatives for both of these. So Alvin Kamara, the positive for him, we have Mark Ingram is gone. Now, a lot of you may argue that, hey, hold on now, Latavius Murray is there now. if I'm being honest, I do not hold Latavius Murray in the same light as Mark Ingram. Maybe a few years ago, like possibly Oakland Latavius Murray, but I don't feel that way about him anymore. I don't think he's as big as a threat as everybody may think he is. And so my positive here is that Mark Ingram is gone. You guys all know how well Alvin Kamara did at the beginning of the season last year. Those first four games with Mark Ingram gone, Alvin Kamara was the RB1. He was insane. Now, when Ingram came back, that first game scared everyone that had Alvin Kamara on their team, because I personally sat and argued saying Mark Ingram is going to be irrelevant. There's no reason for him to come back and do anything. Alvin Kamara is too talented. I have no idea why you would mess up that good thing. They did it. They messed it up. But he bounced back and still ended up killing it over the course of the year, even though Mark Ingram was also doing great. And the year before that, they were the best tandem in the NFL. May have still been last year, but they were the best tandem in the NFL the year before that, with them both just absolutely killing it. Everybody knew about that duo. And he's gone now, and now Alvin Kamara is ready to feast. The only negative, and this was actually a difficult one for me to come up with, not this specifically, but like I couldn't think of anything that was a negative for him, but the one I ended up coming up with was the fact that he has never had the amount of volume that he's about to see this year over the course of an entire season. Now, I imagine Alvin Kamara is in the best shape of his life, and I don't think the volume is going to be an issue, but the fact is we haven't seen it, and that's the only true negative I personally can come up with, and so we'll have to see how that plays out. I personally don't think it's going to be a big issue at all. I think he's going to be ready to go. That's why between the two of them and splitting hairs, I do have him slightly above Christian McCaffrey. And again, people are going to hear this and be like, how? I'm not dogging on McCaffrey at all. That is why I have number 3 as 1A, 1B, because McCaffrey is just as good. You're literally flipping a coin on this. And to some people, it may be an easier decision than it is for me. But for me, I would have to flip a coin on this, or it'd depend on how I felt that day. That's how close these two are. Now, my positives for Christian McCaffrey, literally, I wrote positives and negatives over here for each person. My positive for him literally says one word, and that is everything. Everything about Christian McCaffrey, his situation, his conditioning, the strength. If you guys have seen the pictures of him over this offseason, he looks ridiculous. And last year, although a lot of people think Saquon Barkley ran away with it in PPR as number 1, Christian McCaffrey was number 2 by 0.3 points. So if you're not in a league that does the fractional points, they were literally tied, give or take, on how they would have rounded up or down throughout the season. But if you take their final score and eliminate the decimals off of it, they tied. It was 0.3. We're talking a difference of 3 yards in their PPR points. So Christian McCaffrey was one breakout run for an extra couple yards from being the number 1 running back last year in PPR formats. And so my plus for him is everything. There is nothing that Christian McCaffrey has that makes me worry. So when I have him, again, splitting hairs behind Alvin Kamara, it's not because I'm worried about McCaffrey in any way. It's more so I'm super excited about Alvin Kamara this year. And I think that's one key factor to fantasy as well, is if you have excitement for somebody, it changes your team and the way you feel throughout the year so much to be able to be super excited about somebody. I feel like McCaffrey's one of those where, like, I'm expecting him to do something. Kamara's one of those where, like, I can't wait to see what he does now, because I think he's going to be insane. But the negatives that I have for Christian McCaffrey is the wear and tear's got to catch up at some point. The guy literally played in almost every snap last season. I think it was like 30-something that he didn't participate in. That is a lot of wear and tear on a running back. That being said, he is super young and is in ridiculous shape. And that's why I think for right now, I don't think that year is this year. It may catch up to him next year, year after. I think he's good to go. I don't see the wear and tear really hitting him that hard this season. I do think it's something they're going to have to address at some point if they want to add some longevity to him. But right now, he is full throttle, ready to go. There's nobody even questioning another running back on that team. It is 100% Christian McCaffrey. So that's why my number 3 running back is 1A, 1B, Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey. I cannot pick one or the other. You guys, give me your opinions on that one specifically. I'd love to hear that. But we're going to go ahead and move on to number 5. There's not a number 4 because number 3 is 1A, 1B. So we're jumping straight to 5. Now, number 5 is one that I've seen people slowly starting to jump on the bus for. But at the beginning of the offseason, this is somebody that was not getting any of the respect that they deserved. And my number 5 running back is David Johnson. Now, let me go ahead and knock off any of you that are still upset over last season with David Johnson. I get it. You get burned a little bit because of where you had to draft him at. But he was in the worst possible situation that you could be in as a running back and finished. His numbers dropped so badly that he finished the year as the running back 10. He was number 10. He was still an RB1 in the worst possible situation you could have asked for. His positives this year is with Cliff Kingsbury, and that new offense are a high-powered offense. We'll see how it translates in the NFL. I do think stuff like that, if it ends up being bad, it's not the first year. Because most of that stuff, the first year, kills it because nobody's prepared for it. Nobody's ever seen it in the NFL at a high level. And so that first year, when nobody knows what you're going to do, it's hard to defend against. Now, they may figure it out after a year of tape and be able to capitalize on it. That's why you see a lot of these things that everybody calls the sophomore slump when rookies come in and kill it. It's because nobody knew what to expect from them. And so the next year they know what to expect and are able to, kind of be prepared for it. Well, I think with this new offense, and they're targeting, from what I heard, I think it was 90 offensive plays a game. David Johnson is going to eat. Those of you that are forgetting, this is an over a 400-point back just 3 years ago. Now, 3 years ago sounds ridiculous. People are like, that's forever ago. Not necessarily, because that year he blew up. The next year, he was almost unanimously the number 1 pick overall because of what he did the year before. I, with a lot of you, was one of them that got burned because in my work league, I had the number 1 pick overall. And so, who did I take? David Johnson. Who got injured right off the bat and did not come back the whole year? David Johnson. But one thing you guys need to remember, if you did not know, he injured his arm. I'm pretty sure it was his wrist. That's not your legs. And his wrist is fine now, clearly, or if it was still a problem, you don't finish the running back 10, especially in the situation he was in last year. So, me personally, in my home league, I get the 3rd overall pick. So David Johnson isn't particularly on my radar, and I hate it because David Johnson is the one player this year that I would absolutely love to have on my team. So as we get closer in the other leagues I participate in, depending on where I end up getting to draft at, David Johnson is somebody I 1,000% have my eye on. And the great part about him, depending on what platform you're using to draft on, they have not updated his ADP at all. I think on the NFL platform, he's like the number 9 or 10th pick. On Sleeper, he's number 5, so they kind of fall in line with me on this. But a lot of these platforms don't have him this high. And I personally think you're getting a steal and a half if he falls to you in his ADP in those other platforms. But if you're sitting there at the what everybody is looking at as abysmal 5th pick, what do I do with it? Who do I take? Do I take DeAndre Hopkins? Do I take another running back? I don't know. The first 4 are easy. 5's where it gets hard. 5's not difficult for me at all. I am taking David Johnson 1,000% of the time in any league that I'm in if he's there at 5 and one of the top 4 don't fall. I'm taking him over the other wide receivers as well. He is 1,000% my number 5 pick. The negative that I had written down for him was that he let down some of you last year, and so that is still kind of burning in your memory. But the one greatest tip that I can give you in fantasy football is do not let something in the past burn your decision for that year if it looks good. Like, for me personally, the one that leaves a sour taste in my mouth and a lot of people's is Leonard Fournette. I didn't even have him on my team, but seeing what he did, getting suspended from his own team, and then constantly with the hamstring issue every single week, never knowing if he could go, that's somebody I have no interest in based on his past. But you have to be willing to open your mind. If everything's fine, the whole situation's changed, you can't dwell on that. So for those of you that took him number 2, 3 last year, and he let you down by finishing RB10, which again is still great because a lot of times that's nowhere close to having a bust of a pick. And that mentally is where people have David Johnson. Was he did terrible last year? Completely disagree with that. I don't even remotely agree with it at all. I think he did perfectly fine. So the negative that I had isn't even really a negative. It was more so a point that I wanted to make, that he's just fine, guys. Do not read. Actually, if anything, I'd read more into last year that he was still able to finish 10th with that terrible of an offense. I mean, they were bad. And you finish that great. I have high hopes for them this year. I don't think they're a playoff team. They could. That'd be great to see. But I think they're going to put up numbers. I think they're going to be putting up crazy numbers. And David Johnson's goal is still to rush for 1,000 yards and receive 1,000 yards in a single season. That right there alone is 200 fantasy points. You've got to have, I would say, over 100 catches to get the 1,000 receiving yards. You're looking at 300 points right there just between yards and catches. And then all the touchdowns after that are bonuses. So I think he's a Sherlock number 5. I do not have any concerns about him. I think that's 100% my number 5 overall running back in PPR formats. All right, so number 6. Here's where I wanted to throw in an honorable mention of Melvin Gordon. If Melvin Gordon gets signed and everything's perfectly fine, he's fully healthy, we're good to go, and he's signed very soon, he jumps to number 6 for me. But as of right now, in his current situation that he's in, I don't even plan on drafting him in anywhere. Just because it's, to me, I feel like he's set down, like I mentioned earlier, for the long haul. And I personally think you're going to be drafting an empty slot on your team that you're never going to drop because you just don't know what he's worth. Now, maybe you have somebody in your league that wants to take the shot at holding him, hoping they strike gold, and you can trade him. But ultimately, I don't have Melvin Gordon on my radar at all. But if he's fine, number 6 is where I'd put him. But our true number 6 running back that we're going to go with, because we're going to assume Melvin Gordon is not going to be ready to go, is Le'Veon Bell. I've got a positive and a negative for him. My positive, he's had 1 year off. My negative, he's had 1 year off. Now, I know that sounds a bit confusing, so let me explain both. The positive, he's had 1 year off to rest, take care of his body, get in better shape, not take the beating that he took every single year in Pittsburgh. But on the flip side of that, he is 1 year removed away from football shape. So I'm hoping he doesn't hold back in training camp and in the preseason and takes full advantage of every opportunity they give him. But let's go ahead and take a little bit of a look into his situation. So a lot of people are thinking, man, I do not have Le'Veon Bell there. I have him further back. I've got some other guys I like over him. I think some of you are forgetting a very, very important detail. It's Le'Veon Bell. His talent is through this roof. His football knowledge, being able to read the holes, wait, and go, is great. Now, a lot of you may be thinking to yourself, yeah, but a big portion of his points was PPR from the catches, and I don't like Sam Darnold. I personally, myself, am not the biggest Sam Darnold fan either. I'm still keeping an open mind, hoping that he turns it around and ends up doing great. He's got the talent, but we just haven't seen it yet. But at the same time, that may end up being what helps Le'Veon Bell more than anything. Because what's the easiest thing for a quarterback to do when he doesn't know where else to throw the ball? Check it down to your running back. And so Le'Veon Bell is going to be that guy. When he's on your team, you're going to be loving it. And when you're playing against somebody that has him on their team, you're going to be hating watching the Jets play every single time that Sam Darnold is about to get sacked and he throws it 2 feet over to Le'Veon Bell, that's automatically 1 point in PPR. And then Le'Veon Bell, whatever extra yardage he gets, you take it. But that's like he got 10 yards if he gets dropped on the spot every time he catches it. So I personally think Sam Darnold's inexperience is going to end up helping Le'Veon Bell more than hurting. And I also think Le'Veon Bell is going to end up helping Sam Darnold in his development. So I personally am not worried about the quarterback situation that Le'Veon Bell is in. It's not Ben Roethlisberger. I do understand that. But at the same time, that could help him because Ben Roethlisberger 1,000% prefers going over the defense on the deep passes and then throwing to Le'Veon Bell on either the plays that were set up for it or as his last option. He's done all of his reads, and that's the best one to go. Sam Darnold is probably going to lean on it a lot heavier. And so you've got potential for Le'Veon Bell to move up from 6th as being one of the best running backs. I don't see that happening. The other guys I see having insane years. I also see this as being a great year for running backs anyway, again. So that being said, that is why I have Le'Veon Bell 6th. I think positionally and how good he is and his opportunity, and that's the thing is a lot of people think his opportunity is bad. I think if you look at it the way I do, I don't think it's a bad opportunity at all. As a matter of fact, I think it's going to be really good for him. So I have Le'Veon Bell as my number 6 running back on this list. Number 7, another one people have been bouncing back and forth on a lot. But my number 7 running back in PPR is Joe Mixon. Now, this is where, like I said, people start to get a little finicky with all this. There's certain players, we're going to get to that one in particular, that I know some of you are already kind of starting to tremble in your seat, like, what are you doing, man? Why haven't you mentioned this guy? We'll get to him, but Joe Mixon is my number 7 running back, and there's a big reason why here. I think this is finally the first year that Joe Mixon is going to be the clear-cut, 3-down, all-situation back. And Giovanni Bernard and anyone else they want to throw in on that offense are simply going to be relievers now. Because the biggest hit that you had all the time was Giovanni Bernard coming in and stealing reps from Joe Mixon. And every time I've seen Gio Bernard catch a pass or get a big run, I cringed a little bit when I was a Joe Mixon owner because he was just eating and eating into Joe Mixon's value. And it was so irritating. And I think this is finally, and we started to see this at the end of last year, but I think this is finally the first year where I don't think you have to worry about his workload at all. The negative that I have for Joe Mixon is the offensive tackle that was drafted 11th overall in this year's draft, Jonah Williams, is injured and out for the season. They were very excited about him coming in and helping with the pass and run block on the team, which was going to be huge for Joe Mixon. And the only simplest way I can say this is they didn't have him last year, and Joe Mixon did great. And so, yes, it would have been a huge benefit, but I think Joe Mixon is one of those few guys that is talented enough to do it all, one of the tail-end last guys that you can draft that can do it all, and I absolutely am fully comfortable taking him 7th running back off the board. And it really depends on who is there and not there. And this is where you start getting into, there's a couple wide receivers I'd take over Joe Mixon, but the running backs you've heard on the list so far are the only ones I would draft over him. I think he's poised for a really, really big year. I think he's somebody to be excited about, and I think you guys should definitely consider him over the guys I'm about to name, even though some of you have these other guys over him. Number 8. This is the one that's going to throw a lot of you out of your chairs, and this is the one that's going to get a lot of you really excited because you feel the same way. My number 8 running back is Damian Williams. My positive for him is he is now considered the man for the most powerful offense in the NFL. The downside to him, and the one that everybody's criticizing him on, is his sample size. We got a very, very small sample size on him last year. Let me go ahead and give you an analogy. So you're walking through a store, and they've got samples set out for you to taste. Everybody goes up and tries them, as long as it's something in the realm of things that you like. Most of them you try, it's okay, you throw it out. Some of them you try and like, that's pretty good. And I think that's how most people are viewing the situation, that was a pretty good sample. In my opinion, Damian Williams is that sample out on the table that you try, and then you ask the person, where do I buy this at? And they hand it to you, and you immediately go check out because it was so delicious that you wanted to have it now. I think that Damian Williams, although it is a small sample size, the sample that we got was absolutely delicious if we're sticking with the metaphor. I think Damian Williams is poised to be potentially the biggest breakout this year at the running back position. And I know that can't be the first time you've heard this. So other people are feeling the same way too. I think his opportunity is amazing, and I think his talent is amazing. And that's why I think at the end of the day, I have him at my 8th running back in PPR formats. And so obviously I'm not going to reach on him. In a lot of leagues, you don't have to. And that's what's great about Damian Williams, why I think his value is even better, is you can take him after a lot of these guys, and I think you're sitting great. And depending on your draft position, you could have him as a running back too. Depending on your draft position, if he slips far enough in some of the platforms, he could even be your 3rd round pick, which is, to me, insane. And that's what I was getting at. His ADP is 19.6, and he's getting drafted at about the 19th, 18th spot on Sleeper. And so in the NFL app platform, he's in like the early 3rd to late 3rd round. And so if you're looking at him, you can sit and take those wide receivers or take those other running backs you may not feel are better than he is. But if you do some mock drafts and kind of test the waters and see, you could probably pass him up and still end up getting him. And that's why I think Damian Williams is an absolute steal at almost anywhere you take him. And I think it's justified if you take him as the 8th running back off the board. And that's where I have him at, and that's where I'm going to keep him. Going to go ahead and throw in right now at this very second, we had some more news come in. And it just told us that Cooper Kupp has cleared the PUP list and is fully ready to go for camp. So for those of you, that might be pretty exciting. So it's something to keep an eye on. Number 9. Now this is the one that I think has had a lot of you shaking in your seats about, wondering where does he have him at. Most people have him higher than I do. Number 9 on my list is James Conner. A lot of you absolutely love James Conner. He's the golden boy in all of your hearts because you were able to get him at almost nothing in your drafts. Or you're able to, even better, pick him up off the waiver wire because no one drafted him. He was a league winner. He got you guys to the playoffs. He won the playoffs for you. Well, I shouldn't say that because that kind of gets into where I back it down a little bit with him. Nonetheless, he outperformed his stock by a long shot. And because of that, in most people's eyes, he is beloved. In mine, I still think he is going to be great. 9th running back overall is not bad. So don't think I'm disrespecting him here, although a lot of people will. I think the downside to him is, well, let's go ahead and say his positive first before we go to the negative. The biggest positive that I can say for James Conner is he no longer has Le'Veon Bell dangling over his shoulder, wondering when he's going to be coming back. Now, his performance didn't seem like he was even remotely worried about it, but if he was even a little bit worried about Le'Veon Bell coming back, and that's still how he performed, he's got no worries now. So if that was impacting his play, I am super excited to see what his play is about to be without having to worry about it at all. The downside to James Conner. One of them is pretty obvious. The other one you guys are going to be scratching your heads on with me. The first one is the way he finished the year out last year was just simply not that spectacular. He was not that good towards the end of the season last year. Now, he was a little banged up, so he got that to go for it. I completely understand that, and if he's fully ready to go, you can disregard that. But I think we got to see a little bit of the spark fading, and I still think he's going to kill it this year, and I think you're going to be happy with him regardless where you draft him at. But at the end of the day, I'm not taking him until after the other 8 running backs that I've already stated. The other negative that I have, and this is the one that most people are going to completely disregard because of how late of a pick he was, I personally don't think Jalen Samuels is a threat. I think if he was going to be, he already would have been. A lot of people are reading into the fact that they hired his old coach. onto the coaching staff, I don't think Jalen Samuels is going to be a threat. Where I think the threat's going to come in is Benny Snell. For those of you that don't know who Benny Snell is, he is the all-time leading rusher in the University of Kentucky football's history. He led all of the SEC last year in rushing, and that's what the likes of the Josh Jacobs and the others that you guys are excited about. Benny Snell is a dog at running the football. And I personally think it's a matter of time. As soon as he gets his opportunity, and he may even prove it enough in practice, but I think as soon as he gets his opportunity in game, I think they're going to see how talented this guy is, and I think he's going to end up eating a lot of Connor's productivity. And I shouldn't say a lot, because James Conner's still going to be the clear-cut number one, so don't get that twisted. But I think you're going to see a lot of times where you're really frustrated that Benny Snell even exists if you're a James Conner owner in fantasy football, because he's going to come in and get those third down pushes, which in the end actually ends up helping James Conner. But if that also translates into getting the end zone touches, that's when it's going to hurt. So hopefully, for James Conner's sake, the end zone touches, if they do plan on handing it off, they still got James Conner on the field with Benny Snell, and they use him for the passing game for the end zone as well. So hopefully it doesn't impact him that bad for all of you that are absolutely in love with James Conner. But me personally, I feel that he's going to end up having Benny Snell there as his new shadow, and it's going to end up impacting him. He's still going to be great, over the top great, but I don't think he's going to be RB1 great if that ends up taking place, and that is ultimately why I have him at 9th on my list. Number 10, we have another situation at number 10 that we had at number 3. I've got another 1A, 1B, and number 10 is Todd Gurley and Dalvin Cook. Now, for me, I probably take Todd Gurley if I'm put in the position where I have to choose between these two. If there's not a better wide receiver on the board, I'm probably taking Todd Gurley here just because of the sheer possibilities. But let's go ahead and get into the positive and negatives of both of them. Todd Gurley's positive is, simply put, he's Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley is an absolute fantasy beast. I mean, touchdown machine. If he's even a percentage of what he was, he's still going to be insane. The problem with Todd Gurley is the most obvious one in the world that everyone is concerned about, and that is his injury. Everyone is terrified about it. I'm terrified about it. I don't know that I want to deal with that all year trying to find out. Now, I personally think if you can draft Todd Gurley towards the end of the second round, and then you're able to turn right around and lock down another running back in either the third or fourth that you're comfortable with as your RB2, then I think Todd Gurley is a no-brainer. Because if he gets hurt, you're still okay. But if he works out, you just won your league. Simply put, if he ends up being what he always is, and you have a better running back on your team, or you're able to also get one of the wide receiver ones, you just won your league. Just because of the sheer upside that Todd Gurley has, and you got him that late. If he gets hurt, though, that's why I think you have to lock down that guy that you're comfortable with as your RB2, which means you're also going to have to keep drafting running back heavy, because if you're going to want to have a good enough backup for your bye weeks to where you're not automatically losing because you have an RB1 and then whatever bench player as your bye week. Because your RB3, if Todd Gurley's fine, is going to be your bye week or your flex guy. And so everybody moves up one. And so you got to hope that that fourth guy's good enough to move up one. And so I think you've still got to draft running back heavy if you take Todd Gurley. And I think ultimately that's going to end up turning me away from him. But the only reason is right now, as it stands, I would take him, again, splitting hairs, over Dalvin Cook. And Dalvin Cook, we're going to go ahead and get into his positive and negatives. So his positive is that he's currently healthy, and he finished last year as one of the best running backs in the NFL. And you can erase that last part and just put in the fact that he finished last year playing. That right there enough is great news. He didn't finish the year injured. Now, the negative to him is the same boat as Todd Gurley, is his injuries. I'm not quite as worried about his injuries as I am Todd Gurley's, and that's why what I'm about to say here flips them for me and puts Dalvin Cook ahead of Todd Gurley. Is if come preseason week 3, week 4, Dalvin Cook is fully healthy, not even sore, his hamstrings aren't bothering him, he's fully going at practice, and you don't hear anything relevant enough for them to even mention, Dalvin Cook, green light, go. But if I even hear something as simple as his hamstring was bothering him at practice a little bit, or his knee felt really, really sore after one of the practices or after a preseason game, I immediately turn my red flag right back on Dalvin Cook, and I more so take him if he falls to the third round, into third round, early third round, depending on where you're drafting. If he falls to there, I'd be willing to take him, but the reach in the second round for him, if he's still slightly sore, that's not a good sign, and it doesn't sit well with me that early of picks. I like to take the surest thing that I can. And so that's why number 10, I have 1A, 1B, Dalvin Cook and Todd Gurley. If they're both fully healthy, and we knew that for sure, Todd Gurley's your RB2 or 3, probably 1. But if, and by RB2 or 3, I mean like top 10 running backs, not like he's your third option. If he's fully healthy, he's number 1, 2, or 3 for sure. It's him, Saquon, and then Zeke. But nobody expects that from him. Everybody's scared. Now, with Todd Gurley, another problem with him is I think you fix your Todd Gurley situation by drafting other running backs early. I don't think the fix for drafting Todd Gurley is to draft Darrell Henderson. And the reason for that is because he is so expensive for a handcuff. He's worked his way up to like the 6th and 7th round now. You can get prime time receivers or even your quarterback at that point. Some of the really good elite quarterbacks are still there as well. I'm not taking a handcuff backup that I'm going to keep on my team all year in hopes that, not in hopes, you're literally, if you want Darrell Henderson to play, you're hoping that Todd Gurley gets hurt, which means you're hoping your second round pick, or first, depending on where you drafted him, gets hurt. That's why I don't think the fix to Todd Gurley is drafting his backup. I think it's drafting people that you're comfortable starting in his place. And let somebody else reach on Darrell Henderson. It may pay out great for them, but if it doesn't and Todd Gurley plays all year, they just wasted a really valuable pick in the 6th or 7th round, in my personal opinion. And so the flip side is Dalvin Cook, the one I think is more likely to be healthy than Todd Gurley. If he's fully healthy, this is why I think I have them side by side, because if Todd Gurley's healthy, it's not even close. But if Todd Gurley stays slightly injured and Dalvin Cook's healthy, Dalvin Cook's going to be better than Todd Gurley. And so it really just depends. That's one of those you can't pinpoint. It's hard to get in the injury predicting business. It's not something anybody wants to do, and it's hard to weigh that in. But when they're that high of a risk, you have to factor it in. Otherwise, you're going to be burning yourself every year that it happens, and you're going to regret it, not doing a little bit more looking into it, or just settling for somebody one step down and not having to miss out on having that entire pick be wasted. So that right there is my top 10, even though it's technically 11 guys for PPR running backs. Let's go ahead and run through them one more time. Number 1 is Saquon Barkley. Number 2, Ezekiel Elliott. Number 3 is a 1A, 1B. Flip a coin, take either one. Alvin Kamara, Christian McCaffrey. Number 5 is David Johnson. Number 6 is Le'Veon Bell. Number 7 is Joe Mixon. Number 8 is Damian Williams. Number 9 is James Conner. And number 10 is another 1A, 1B coin flip between Todd Gurley and Dalvin Cook. Although I don't think it's a coin flip if Dalvin Cook is fully healthy and not even sore. I don't think it's a coin flip at all. I take Dalvin Cook over Gurley in that situation. But if they're both questionable, you take Gurley because his upside's higher than Dalvin Cook's if they're both healthy. Now, to round out the video, we're tailing it off with our Q&A. I got these questions from the Q&A forums on the Sleeper app. As of right now, I'm keeping the usernames anonymous, but if you're the one that commented this, and I'm going to have the name in my files, so I'll know if you're telling the truth or not, but if you're the one that commented this question, feel free to leave a comment below saying it was you. Now, if you guys have any questions that you want to submit for the Q&A, leave them in the comment section below. you will absolutely take priority to any of the ones that I find on any other forums, because I want to answer the questions that my audience has before pulling them off of a forum somewhere. But until we get a lot more in the comment section, this is going to be where we get our questions for Q&A. So our question 1 is, shouldn't Chubb, meaning Nick Chubb, be taken over Joe Mixon? Every year I have trouble trusting Mixon. So right off the bat, I'm going to say no, not a chance am I ever drafting Nick Chubb over Joe Mixon, for a couple reasons. First one, I don't fully understand that every year I have trouble trusting Mixon. Maybe 2 years ago, last year, I think he was perfectly fine where you were able to draft him at. He outperformed his draft position. I had him on my team last year, and I was extremely happy with the results that I had. He played so well, and if you look at the stats for the year, they're slightly botched because of the 2 weeks he missed from having to scope his knee. But other than that, he was great for the most part of the season. And so I don't really know the trust issues. I feel like I can trust him now after last season. Had this been a question at the beginning of last year, ignoring the Nick Chubb part, but whether you can trust Joe Mixon or not at the beginning of last year, I completely understand because of what I discussed earlier in my top 10, with Joe Mixon always having that guy behind him and Gio Bernard taking some work from him. I think green light with Mixon. Now, my opinion on Chubb is going to be great. A lot of people are completely ignoring Kareem Hunt. They say it's not a big deal. If Chubb is killing it all year, there's no way Kareem Hunt comes in and takes any of that. They're not going to reward somebody that's suspended to come in and take work from somebody that's killing it. Two things you need to look at here. They are a win-now team. The Cleveland Browns are. With that talent they put together, they're trying to win a Super Bowl now. Everyone's trying to do that, but some people have realistic goals, and other people, they know they're in rebuild. This team is trying to win right now. So if Kareem Hunt has any form of helping them get that, they're going to use him. So if he's better in the passing game than Nick Chubb is, definitely going to be. He's going to eat those reps for that alone, because they know while he's out there, they can fool the defenses with, are we running it or are we passing it? Nick Chubb, you can almost guarantee, is going to be a run most of the time. He does a little bit of receiving, but it's almost always running with him. Kareem Hunt, you're going to be able to mix it up a little bit more. That being said, my strategy with Nick Chubb, and my advice I can give to any of you out there thinking about drafting him, take him, let him absolutely eat, and the second you hear the first rumor about Kareem Hunt coming back, trade him to somebody that is willing to give you a little bit more than you deserve for him, and then you can sit comfortably and but only do this if you're comfortable watching him still be successful even when Kareem Hunt comes back. Do not do that if you're going to sit and be upset about him having good games, even though Kareem Hunt's back, and be like, man, I shouldn't have got rid of him. Because you also got to look at it, once you get to that point and Kareem Hunt's back doing good and eating into his points, you're going to say, man, I should have got rid of him. And so you have to be somebody that can live with your choices. And so that's why my personal strategy with Nick Chubb would be trading him to build in an area that I need help in. If I'm good and I just want another running back, throw in a running back and get a nice sleeper added with him, and you're going to get some good value. Or maybe you might be able to throw something in on your side that may be valuable. You may have two players like Nick Chubb that are really good, but their positions are about to go away, about to hit a hard schedule, or they've had a stroke of luck. You know, everybody's got that player that blew up that 1 week that really shouldn't have. Send them. People have good weeks all the time. That doesn't mean they're suddenly going to be great for the rest of the year. So Nick Chubb, I think, absolutely should be traded. I think he should be drafted to trade. That's my strategy with him. So to full-on answer your question, shouldn't Chubb be taken over Mixon? I personally say absolutely not. I don't even think that's a question. Not to disrespect your question, I'm just meaning me personally, I wouldn't even think twice about it. Question number 2, Dalvin Cook or Le'Veon Bell in PPR? Now, you pretty much just got my answer from this for our topic of the video, but I'm going to go ahead and discuss it a little bit more in depth. I absolutely take Le'Veon Bell here because, again, all those points I made earlier, I think people are viewing his situation in New York and with Sam Darnold as a negative, and I think it just might end up being a positive. I don't know that we'll see the Steelers numbers we've seen in the past, but I think he's going to put up a ridiculous year, enough to the point where I have him ranked 6th. Dalvin Cook, if he is fully healthy, ready to go all year long, plays 16 games, may end up better than Le'Veon Bell. But the injury risk is higher than Le'Veon Bell's. So if I'm having the draft right now and I get to choose out of the two of them in PPR format, I'm taking Le'Veon Bell without hesitation every single time. Now, our third and final question on the Q&A today is, I have the 9th overall pick. The 6th is taking Le'Veon Bell. The 7th is taking DeAndre Hopkins. 8th is taking Devontae Adams. Who do I take at 9th and 12th? Now, unless you're running two teams, I'm presuming this is a 10-man league, and so you've got the turnaround second pick in the second round. So I basically played out a couple scenarios here and did a mock draft on what I would do, and I preset those picks before. And I assumed the top 5 that I had earlier were the 5 that went before Le'Veon, meaning Saquon, Ezekiel Elliott, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, and David Johnson. Those are your top 5. I'm assuming all those are gone, including the ones that you just named. One that you're not taking into account here, and the one that I would take here, is Tyreek Hill. You've got to factor that in if people are starting to change their picks off that yet or not. So if you've not thought about that and factored that in, you may want to reapproach this question, because somebody may take Tyreek Hill earlier, although I don't think they should. I think this is right where he should go. And the reason I say take Tyreek Hill is because on the flip, when it comes back to you, I think if you can, this is where you got to do some mock drafts and see how it's happening. But I think if you're able to snag a Joe Mixon at pick 12 and you have a Tyreek Hill, Joe Mixon, you're sitting great. But these are a couple of the scenarios that I said was, if you can't get Mixon, take James Conner there at 12. Those are the two that I would go for, a Tyreek Hill first, and that. The other options you have are also taking Hill and Juju, going the double wide receiver stack, or taking Mixon and Connor, doing the double running back stack. But I think at that position you have cream of the crop wide receivers to choose from. I definitely think you need to snag at least one of them. I personally would not go the Hill Juju route. I would try to take James Conner or Joe Mixon if you can get them to fall to you, and go ahead and make sure you lock down that RB1 spot as well. But just to make you sit a little bit more comfortable on your decision, the top wide receivers that are still there at your 3rd round pick when it comes back to you are Amari Cooper, AJ Green, Stephon Diggs, and Julian Edelman. Now, give or take, depending on your league, there might be one that falls further. There might be one of those that's gone. But those are the wide receivers you have to work with. And the top running backs at that point are Marlon Mack, Devonta Freeman, Derrick Henry, or Josh Jacobs. So I really think you could go either route at the beginning. It's just those running backs that I named, are you comfortable with one of those being your number 1 running back? If you are, you better hope that's the one that falls to you, and you can commit to the wide receiver there. If not, then you definitely want to take Mixon or Connor there, or even Williams if you can get him, if those two are gone, or if you're high on him like I am. So I'm trying to be realistic though with how the drafts are going to go. Williams is one of those that I think you can wait on. You probably couldn't at 9th. You'd have to take him at 12th if you're wanting him. But there's other good players at that point you can take instead. So if you're able to pull a Tyreek Hill and a Joe Mixon, I say absolutely 100% that's the route I would take. If Joe Mixon goes, then try to take James Conner or Damian Williams, or insert any of the others, Todd Gurley, Dalvin Cook, if those are the ones you want. I definitely think you need to lock down a running back here. But if you go the wide receiver route, just know the best running backs left are going to be Mack, Freeman, Henry, and Jacobs. And I think you absolutely need to go running back at your 3rd and 4th pick if you go wide receiver, because the running backs fall off a cliff fast. So that is our Q&A part of the episode. This right here is our new segment that I personally came up with. If somebody else has done something similar, I apologize, but I'm pretty sure this is original, and this is called Thorn. This is your Thorn of the Week or Thorn of the Year, and that's a shortened version of Thorn in the Foot. And basically what I mean by that is a player that was a thorn in the foot of one of your guys, and if he wasn't there doing what he was doing, your guy would have done a lot better. And so because the season hasn't started yet and we can't do Thorn of the Week, we're going to go ahead and do Thorn of the Year for last year. And after looking at it, I personally think The Thorn of the Year award goes to Jamal Williams, running back for the Packers. And the foot that he was a thorn in was Aaron Jones. So let me go ahead and explain. So Williams last year had 121 rushing attempts. That's a significant amount. He had 464 rushing yards, 3 rushing touchdowns. He also had 27 catches for 210 yards. Aaron Jones, who finished 24th overall running back in PPR formats, had 133 attempts, only 12 more than Jamal Williams had. 728 yards, nearly double, and was averaging 5.5 yards per carry, which was the most efficient on any running backs that had more than really 60 attempts last year. The most efficient at 5.5 yards per carry. He had 8 rushing touchdowns as well. He had 26 catches for 206 yards and 1 touchdown. Now, let me go ahead and assume that Aaron Jones would have taken all of Jamal Williams' work, which isn't realistic. Jamal Williams probably still would have some, or if Jamal Williams didn't exist, somebody else probably would have still had some of this. But just to kind of put it into context of Jamal Williams' stats, if you gave those opportunities to Aaron Jones, this is what his stat line looks like. So if you take the 121 attempts, rushing attempts that Jamal Williams had, and times that by the 5.5 that Aaron Jones was averaging, that's an additional 655.5 yards. And you add that to the 728 that he had, you have a total of 254 rushing attempts for 1,393.5 yards. And if you want to add the 3 touchdowns that he got as well, you possibly have 11 touchdowns, give or take. You could have more because of the more opportunities. He may have broken out at some point. You could have less. Maybe he didn't strike luck that Jamal Williams may have had on the 3 that he got. But nonetheless, we're going to assume that if he took over the workload and got the same touchdowns, you're looking at 1,393.5 yards and 11 touchdowns rushing. And if you take his 27 catches that he had and times that by the average yards per catch that Aaron Jones was having and combine it together, that's 53 catches total for 419.9 yards and 1 touchdown. When you add all of that together, you have 1,813.4 total yards with 12 touchdowns and 53 catches. In PPR, that would have been 306.3 PPR points and would have put him at the RB6 last year had he had all of the work that Jamal Williams took from him. So for those of you that had Aaron Jones, Jamal Williams was a massive thorn in your foot because you could not stand every time the guy was on the field because you wanted Aaron Jones to get those reps and Jamal Williams just kept eating them up. Now, the only guys that qualify for thorn are the ones that you wouldn't really want to rely on anyway. So for instance, like you could argue Mark Ingram was a thorn in the foot for Alvin Kamara, but in a lot of leagues and a lot of formats, Mark Ingram was a pretty reliable starter as well, even though Alvin Kamara was too, or at least a reliable flex or solid bench player. Jamal Williams is one of those that you had way down the list and you hoped he worked out on the weeks you had to start him. But more likely than not, of the two, you're going to take Aaron Jones every day of the week. So that's why our Thorn of the Year for last year goes to Jamal Williams. Thank you guys so much for tuning in for episode 1 of the Fantasy Football Outpost podcast type videos. I've got to get a better way of explaining that because these aren't live podcasts, but I may just end up calling it the Fantasy Football Outpost podcast as we get going on. But these are not live because of a lot of mistakes and stuff. I'm new to the podcast format, although I do on my gaming channel live stream almost every single night. It's a little bit more difficult when you're reading stats and giving out information to hold that up intact for an entire hour or longer without messing up and botching some of your words. So we don't do it live, but I may still end up calling it podcast. Nonetheless, this is episode 1. My name is Dallas. You're watching the Fantasy Football Outpost, and we'll see you. Thanks for watching.